In this video, you're going to learn about classical conditioning, a type of learning where an organism learns to associate different stimuli. To illustrate this, let's say we have a dog here and he drools when we give him some food. Now, if we set up a routine where we ring a bell right before he eats, he'll start to salivate to the sound of the bell alone. Now, the reason this happens is because he's learned that the ringing of the bell means that food is on its way. This is the most famous example of classical conditioning, which was brought to light by a man named Ivan Pavlov. Now, Ivan Pavlov actually discovered this form of conditioning by mistake when he was studying salivation in dogs. The dogs that he worked with repeatedly would drool at the sight of their food bowls, or the people who fed them, and even that person's footsteps. It was then that Pavlov realized that he had something, so he started his research on this strange phenomenon. Let's take a look at the individual components that make up classical conditioning. First, we have the unconditioned stimulus, the UCS, and the unconditioned response, the UCR. The UCS is the normal or natural stimuli, and the UCR is the normal or natural response to that stimuli. Second, we have the neutral stimulus. In Pavlov's example, the neutral stimulus is the bell. Lastly, we have the conditioned stimulus, the CS, and the conditioned response, the CR. Once the dog has been conditioned to salivate at the ringing of the bell becomes the conditioned stimulus, and the salivation becomes the conditioned response. Just when you thought this couldn't get any simpler, Pavlov and company identified 5 major processes to classical conditioning, the first of which is acquisition. Acquisition deals with the initial learning of the relation between the bell and the food. It was found that if the neutral stimulus is presented around a half a second before the UCS, that time delay is more likely to help the subject associate the neutral stimulus with the unconditioned stimulus. Extinction deals with the reduced responsiveness to the CS if the UCS isn't paired with the CS anymore. So, in English, that means if you keep ringing the bell without giving the dog food, he'll salivate less and less. Spontaneous recovery is when a previously weakened or extinct conditioned response is brought back to life after a period of not sensing the conditioned stimulus. So, after an hour of not hearing the bell, the dog may once again salivate when he hears it ring. Generalization is when similar stimuli elicit the conditioned response. Along with the dog salivating to the sound of different bells, another example would be someone terrified of rats also being afraid of mice and squirrels. Discrimination is the ability to discern between a relevant stimuli and a conditioned stimulus. A dog that's conditioned to salivate to the tone of a bell won't salivate to the sound of a horn. Classical conditioning also carries with it some biological aspects as well. An animal is not as likely to be conditioned if it biologically has a smaller learning capacity or if the stimuli or lessons being learned are irrelevant to its survival. Conditioning can increase the chances of survival by making us avoid foods that have made us sick. If you ate raw meat and got sick afterwards, you would have hopefully developed an aversion to eating raw meat again.